From the release of Iron Man in 2008 to the release of the Avengers in 2012, it was only a mere 4 years to realize a dream that a few people held so close to their heart. And this was going to be the movie that either made the Marvel Cinematic Universe a huge success or a complete failure. But the story of the Avengers does not begin in 2012. Instead, it takes us all the way back to the formation of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Before there was Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk, Thor, and Captain America, there was Avi Arad. And in early April of 2005, Avi Arad, the CEO of Marvel Studios, would officially announce his plans to develop an Avengers feature film. This announcement was of course accompanied with the huge news that Marvel Entertainment has officially declared independence of Merrill Lynch, which was their previous partner, and this was to produce the slate of films that would be distributed by Paramount Pictures. Later on, speaking to the Wall Street analysts, Marvel Studios intended to originally release all the individual characters in their own standalone movies. There was of course various reasons that Marvel intended to do it this way, but their main argument was the fact that these characters were still relatively new in the minds of the everyday population. So if they could introduce every character one by one in their own films and have them get together in a full feature film down the road, the audience would be more likely to go see the rest of the films to know what exactly is happening. While the plans from 2005 on were rolling for every individual character to get their own movie off the ground, Marvel was not in a rush to produce the Avengers just yet, until February of 2007, where Warner Brothers announced that they were officially going to be making a Justice League movie titled Justice League Mortal, which would go on to be directed by George Miller. Warner Brothers worried about the success of the Justice League and the people not knowing who all of these characters are and worrying about bad critical reception due to all these characters being thrown together at the last moment and not having an established universe, decided to pull the plug on Justice League Mortal the day they started shooting. And just a few months after the announcement of Justice League Mortal, Marvel announced that screenwriter Zach Penn, who originally wrote The Incredible Hulk, was hired to write the film. But unfortunately, it was not going to be smooth sailing from there. Due to the 2007-2008 writer strike, which delayed a whole lot of production in Hollywood, the movie would see minor setbacks and delays in writing. But Marvel would find themselves ahead of most. Marvel would be quick to go to negotiations with the Writers Guild of America, and Marvel was successful, guaranteeing that they could make films based on Captain America, Ant-Man, and the Avengers. And after the huge success of the 2008 release of Iron Man, Marvel Studios would go on to set a July 2011 release date for the Avengers. And in September of 2008, that very same year, Marvel Studios would announce a brand new partnership on top of the one they already had with Paramount Pictures, which would give the company the distribution rights to 5 future films. Casting for the first Avengers movie began in October of 2008. With the first person agreeing to reprise his role being Robert Downey Jr., who is of course Iron Man. By that time, it was already public knowledge that Terrence Howard has been replaced by Don Cheadle to play James Rhodes, aka War Machine. It was reported by multiple outlets that he would be reprising his role in the Avengers. Later on, Don Cheadle would say that he does not think that the War Machine character will be appearing in the movie. And by the time that news hit, no one could focus on the recasting because 2 other major pieces of news would help Marvel cement itself in a bright future. The first being that the director of Iron Man 1, Jon Favreau, has signed on to be the executive producer of the Avengers, and the second piece of news being that there has been a deal made to produce 3 additional movies, this being Iron Man 2, Thor, and Captain America: The First Avenger. Just a few days later, it would be confirmed by Lou Ferrigno, who of course voiced the Hulk, that he would have a role in the upcoming Avengers movie. And in February of 2009, Samuel L. Jackson would officially announce that he has signed a 9-picture movie deal with Marvel Studios that would include film and TV appearances. And also in September of 2009, Edward Norton, who of course previously played Bruce Banner in The Incredible Hulk, said he was open to negotiations to reprise his role. Later on in October of 2009, Jon Favreau, the executive producer of Avengers, would officially come out and say that he is not going to be the director. And when asked about it, he had this to say: "It's going to be hard, because I was so involved in creating the world of Iron Man, and Iron Man is very much a tech-based hero. And then with the Avengers, you're going to be introducing some superhero aspects because of Thor. Mixing the two of those works very well in the comic books, but it's going to take a lot of thoughtfulness to make that work." And while the casting of Black Widow for Iron Man 2 was on the way, various people reported that Emily Blunt, who was currently in the negotiations for the role of the Black Widow for Iron Man 2, would be reprising her role. But in March of 2009, we would get the official news that Scarlett Johansson was in fact going to play the Black Widow and also be reprising her role in future Marvel films. And we now also know that in the early drafts of the film that Hank Pym and the Wasp were originally to be included. Ant-Man being pulled out of the movie due to Edgar Wright's involvement with the standalone Ant-Man film, and the Wasp being pulled at last minute due to her taking a huge forefront in the film due to the director's preference. And just a few weeks later, it was officially announced that Marvel would be delaying the film from its initial July 2011 release date to May 4th of 2012, almost a full year later. But at the same time, they announced that Chris Hemsworth would be reprising his role as Thor, and Tom Hiddleston would be back as Loki. And right after that announcement, Zach Penn in 2009 would go on to say that his role and job was to go between all of the movies and make sure that everything was lining up accordingly. They wanted the movies to feel like a comic book, to feel interconnected, and for the audience to be rewarded if they saw all the movies and knew what was happening as an overall story and what everything was building towards. Next up in 2010 would be the next official big thing we get about the Avengers, with the media getting to do a sit-down interview with Kevin Feige. And while asking him questions about Iron Man 2, they got to ask specifically about the Avengers and the involvement of such characters as Thor. And one of the many things most of the outlets were interested in was how Marvel was going to be able to balance the fantastical and supernatural world of Thor to the semi-realistic version of Iron Man that is featured in the world. At this point, he would go on to talk about the tree of life and the old Norse mythologies, saying that this is like real science, but it's science that we haven't discovered yet. This would actually go on to be almost identically described in the Thor movie. And right after this, it was officially confirmed that Zach Penn had completed the first draft of the Avengers, which was given to Joe Quesada, Marvel's editor-in-chief, along with Brian Michael Bendis. And on that same day, it was confirmed that Chris Evans would be playing Captain America in 3 feature films, one of these being the upcoming Avengers. And after the announcement of Chris Evans, in April of 2010, the rumors hit the internet with a confirmation by the man himself, Joss Whedon, that he was close to final negotiations to direct the upcoming film. At the same time, Louis Leterrier, the director of The Incredible Hulk, also offered his services to Marvel, but was ultimately turned down. And Joss Whedon was hired officially in July of 2010. And when Whedon officially signed on, he took the original draft by Zach Penn and told Marvel that they had nothing here. He said, and I quote, "Pretend this draft never happened." Right after that, Whedon would go on to write a quick 5-page treatment for his own vision of the Avengers film. The tagline for this was Avengers, some assembly required, which was an obvious riff and a nod to Avengers Assemble. Marvel quickly agreed to let Joss Whedon direct and write the Avengers movie, although they did put a few stipulations in there. For starters, the villain of the movie would need to be Loki. The second act of the movie would have to focus on the team fighting amongst each other. And of course, their main requirement, the movie must be done by May of 2012. Upon Joss Whedon being hired, Avi Arad had a few things to say. He said, and I quote, My personal opinion is that Joss will do a fantastic job. He loves these characters and is a fantastic writer. It's part of his life, so you know he's going to protect it. I expect someone like him to go and make the script even better. And at this time, Joss Whedon was no stranger to the Marvel Universe, previously having actually written Marvel comics based on the X-Men. Kevin Feige would also go on and add, "I've known Joss for many years. We were looking for the right thing and he came in and met on it. We wanted to find a director on the verge of doing something great, and we think Joss is it." And later on at San Diego Comic-Con 2010, Joss Whedon in an interview said what drew him to these characters was the fact that none of them should be together, none of them should be a family or getting along, but they are forced to work on the same team. The rest of 2010 would mainly be focused on casting of additional roles. Jeremy Renner of course reprised his role as Hawkeye from Thor, Clark Gregg was once again back as Agent Coulson, and we got the official announcement that Mark Ruffalo would be replacing Edward Norton. Now to this date we still do not know the full story of why Edward Norton was replaced, as both sides have their own version. Originally, Edward Norton felt like he got disrespected by Marvel and Universal on the development of The Incredible Hulk, when they told him that they would use all of the material and character development that was in the movie that he had specifically written for it, and then editing out close to 30 minutes of it left him in a bad position. He decided not to do any of the marketing for that movie. On the other hand, Edward Norton claims that they always wanted to go with Mark Ruffalo, as he was Universal's number 2 choice, which Marvel was pushing for number 1, but he did not end up getting it as Universal thought that they needed a bigger star for the Hulk. Kevin Feige would go on to add a quote that says, "Our decision is definitely not one based on monetary factors, but instead rooted in the need for an actor who embodies the creative and collaborative spirit of our other talented cast members." Quickly after that statement was given, Edward Norton's agent would go on and say that that statement was purposefully misleading and an inappropriate attempt to paint our client in a negative light. Later on in 2014, Edward Norton would come out and say that it was officially his decision to pass up on playing the Hulk, that he did not want to be associated with just playing one character. And after all of that, in August of 2010, it was reported by Paramount Pictures and Marvel Studios that they officially plan to start shooting in February of 2011. Simultaneously, they announced that they would also be shooting the entire movie in 3D. And just 2 months after that, in October of 2010, Grumman Studios in New York and Steiner Studios in Brooklyn were announced as the official filming locations. And later on that month, Walt Disney Studios, who is of course the owner of Marvel, agreed to pay Paramount at least $115 million for the worldwide distribution rights to Iron Man 3 and the Avengers. In turn, this deal would allow Paramount to have their logo show up in associations with the Marvel Studios at the beginning of all of their movies. And the final amount of casting was completed in February of 2011, where Kobe Smulders was officially cast as Maria Hill. Stellan Skarsgård of course reprised his role from Thor, and both Paul Bettany and Gwyneth Paltrow reprised their roles from the Iron Man films. Principal photography for the movie started on April 25th of 2011 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And just 2 short months later, in June of 2011, the stuntman Jeremy Fitzgerald was badly injured trying to do a stunt which involved a 30-foot drop. But despite the injury, he would quickly recover and continue to be working on the set of the movie. Once production in New Mexico was over, it moved over to Ohio in August of 2011. 4 weeks would be spent on location shooting on the East 9th Street of Ohio, which would double for New York's 42nd Street. This is of course where the majority of the final battle in the third act of the movie would take place. And reserve soldiers which were assigned to the Columbus, Ohio base, who were part of the Ohio-based 391st Military Police Battalion, provided background characters and action during those pivotal scenes. And the staff sergeant of this base was very pleased with the outcome of how the military was portrayed in the movie. And speaking of Ohio, that was not the only thing that was shot there. They also shot various scenes in the large vacuum chamber at NASA, which is right near Sandusky, Ohio. These scenes would be used for the opening of the movie, which of course saw Loki and the testing on the Tesseract. And additional scenes were shot around Ohio, specifically near the Detroit Superior Bridge, and the public square in the southwest quadrant, which was turned into Germany at the beginning of the movie. And the final stage of filming would see the principal photography move to New York City, where they only shot about 2 days worth. The two main locations which were used for shooting were Park Avenue and Central Park. But for the rest of the scenes that take place in Manhattan and around New York, they decided to take a more CG approach. So for 3 days, the actual effects supervisor Jake Morrison was on location to get various reference and aerial shots of the surrounding areas of New York. Morrison explained that this was the best way to get opening shots and wide shots of New York, while stating that CG can recreate the same thing, you just do not get the actual feel of New York as if you were actually to look at a real shot. After shooting was wrapped, it was quickly announced in December of 2011 that the film would be converted to 3D. And Joss Whedon went on and said that he did not have a problem with this, as the way his movies are shot would make sense for it, and he said that the Avengers would not be obnoxiously 3D, there wouldn't be things to just fly at your face for no reason. And just a month after that, in January of 2012, it was reported by Disney that the film would be digitally remastered for an IMAX 3D experience, and that the film would see an IMAX release day and date with the worldwide release. And in May of 2012, Joss Whedon officially announced that he decided to include Thanos in the post-credits scene of the Avengers. Although the character was not identified as Thanos, Joss Whedon definitely said that this is who it was intended to be. He said that he is the most powerful and fascinating Marvel villain. He's the granddaddy of badasses, and that's why he loves him. And he said that one of the many reasons doing this was because when you look at some of the most important things that have happened in Marvel, Thanos was behind all of them. So it was a great way to have Loki working for someone while building up a future villain. And then of course there is the scene of the Avengers eating shawarma, which was shot just 1 day after the worldwide premiere of the movie on April 12th of 2012. And many people thought that this scene came out of nowhere, but this was actually a callback to Joss Whedon's previous work on Angel and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And that the scene of them just kind of sitting around and eating shawarma was almost an identical scene of what happened after they finished a long shoot during an episode of Buffy. They were just worn out and stuffing food into their mouth. Now when it came down to finishing all the visual effects shots for the movie, over 2,200 visual effects shots in total were combined to deliver the final product. 14 companies collaborated on this movie, including big notes such as Industrial Light and Magic, Weta Digital, and Digital Domain, just to name a few. Now of course the leading visual effects were all done by Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM for short, and they were the leaders on creating some of the most important scenes in the Avengers, including the cityscape and the digital sky you see around the entire city. Another thing they had a major factor in was of course the design and the use of the helicarrier, and most importantly the body doubles for Iron Man and the Hulk. And of course the technology having advanced since the last time they used the Hulk in the Incredible Hulk, Mark Ruffalo would be used for all references for the Hulk wearing a motion capture suit. But at the same time he was wearing a suit, they were actually motion tracking his face as well, because they wanted to convey the entire emotion range from Mark Ruffalo to the Hulk. Now to recreate New York as faithfully as they could, Industrial Light and Magic sent an entire team of photographers to New York City for 8 weeks. The team was assigned by collecting as much high detail photography as they could to be able to recreate 10 city blocks of New York City for correct reference. The shots were sent back every day to Industrial Light and Magic, which would then convert them to a digital New York playground. During these 8 weeks, Sony and Avi Arad had conversations with Marvel Studios, and the two agreed upon themselves that they would let Oscorp Tower, which was featured in The Amazing Spider-Man, feature in their movie. Unfortunately, it was too late due to Industrial Light and Magic already being almost wrapped on getting New York City to look how it does in real life, and the Avengers Tower was instead the only one they could get in there, so Oscorp Tower had to be pulled. Now as with any big Hollywood movie, of course they are going to need an accompanying soundtrack. Alan Silvestri was hired after his phenomenal work on Captain America: The First Avenger. and many of the same soundtrack cues and elements that could be heard in the first Avenger transition over to the Avengers soundtrack. And in March of 2012, the rock band Soundgarden announced on their Facebook page that their song Live to Rise would be included in the film's soundtrack. As the days counted down towards the release in February of 2012, Disney officially announced that the film would get retitled in European regions. Not to be confused with the British TV series of the same name, the film would be retitled Avengers Assemble. And other areas would do the same thing, except they would be called Marvel's Avengers Assemble. Which that phrase was also a big marketing thing, as it started to appear on all their action figures and various other Marvel products. This started as early as 2010, as Marvel and Disney saw that making Avengers Assemble the phrase a marketing slogan would be beneficial to getting the brand awareness out there. Now, unlike promotions for their other movies, which did have a pretty big presence at Comic-Cons, the Avengers would see such promotion that was unmatched by almost any other movie by Marvel or Disney up until this point. Having skipped out showing anything for San Diego Comic-Con of 2011, it was announced by Marvel Studios that October 2011 at New York Comic-Con would be a big reveal for the Avengers. This also happens to be the first time I went to any comic convention, and I was actually sitting in person when they revealed the first footage, and the room absolutely exploded in claps. If you actually watched a replay of that, which can still be found on YouTube, you can distinctly hear me screaming F yeah when they announced Mark Ruffalo was there. And of course, keeping all of their cards close to their chest, the next time we would see a major reveal of anything for the Avengers would be at the following Super Bowl of the same year of release, where a quick 30-second spot was shown telling people that they could find the full trailer online. The trailer in just 24 hours will go on to be the biggest trailer of all time, surpassing The Dark Knight Rises by 12 million views. And much like all the previous films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, The Avengers was set to have a video game release concurrent with the release date of the feature film. The game was set to release on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, the Wii U, and the PC, and it was going to be a first-person shooter / brawler. Now, unlike the previous releases, this game was not going to be put out by Sega. Instead, it was actually being developed by THQ and THQ Studios Australia. But unfortunately, due to THQ going bankrupt and having to shut off all of their studios, the game was inevitably cancelled. Only one surviving version of the game exists, and it is at the hands of Joe Quesada, who is of course the president of Marvel Comics. But the story of this game did not actually mirror what was happening in the movie, where the movie was actually an invasion done by the Chitauri, which were led by Loki and pushed by Thanos. The game was actually going to focus on a comic book storyline involving the Skrulls. So after the failure of THQ, Ubisoft saw it quick to snatch up the Avengers license and would put out a video game of their own. This will be a motion capture game titled Marvel Avengers Battle for Earth. The game was developed for the Xbox 360 and the Wii U, specifically to use motion controls. The game got an overall score of a 6 out of 10, being just good enough, but many people criticized it for just being lackluster and having no real heart. And then came the big day, the worldwide release of The Avengers, which of course was tracking for a $150 million opening weekend in the United States. All eyes were now on Disney. Was this going to be a huge success that finally paid off the ultimate gamble, or was this going to be the ultimate failure where everybody would say, "I told you so"? And after the weekend was over, Marvel's Avengers managed to be the first movie to pass $200 million opening dollar weekend with a total of $207.5 million. The film managed to shatter every expectation anybody had going into it. But that was not the only record it would shatter. The second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh weekend, it held records on all of those. Fastest to break 1 billion and various other records were all shattered by this movie. The film would go on to make $1.52 billion in its entire theatrical run, ending its run as the third highest grossing movie of all time. And to this day, it is still the highest grossing comic book movie of all time. And what is even more impressive is the fact that it is the third highest graded comic book movie of all time on Rotten Tomatoes, only sitting second to the tie between The Dark Knight and Iron Man 1. And after a huge success in theaters, it was no wonder that the movie was going to be coming out faster than most Disney releases on home media, which would see its release on September 25th, 2012 on DVD, digital, and Blu-ray. And Marvel and Disney also teamed up to bring us a special edition Phase 1 box set, which would take all of the previous movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and pack them all into one box for the ultimate collector. The film would go on to hold the #1 spot for home release for close to 5 weeks. When it came to the lasting impact of the movie, the film would go on to win over 22 awards, whether it was the best film, best visuals, best villain, or whatever else you could throw it into. But the biggest award that the Avengers won was the approval of fans, as now Marvel has become the #1 brand in the world, surpassing that of Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man. Avengers Assemble, that line was now a worldwide trademark and a worldwide recognition of success. And soon after this, Hollywood would see a boom of studios trying to copy this success in trying to create a shared universe. But Marvel had the opposite idea. Now that we've tackled the big screen, let's tackle the small screen. And they would start the production on their first Marvel television series titled Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So after the Walt Disney purchase of Marvel Entertainment in 2009, one of the first big pieces of announcement was the fact that Marvel announced the Marvel Television division was being formed under the leadership of Jeff Loeb. And in the months following that announcement, various different pilots went into production. And in July of 2012, right on the heels of the Avengers' huge success, ABC and Marvel Television announced a partnership to bring a MCU-style series to television next fall. At the time, it was unknown what the series would be about, but Marvel did say a kernel of an idea with a number of scenarios being explored, including a high-concept cop show. And the following month, it was officially announced that Joss Whedon, who was of course in charge and directed Marvel's The Avengers, and was the creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Angel, and Firefly, would be developing this untitled series for Marvel Television. And in August of 2012, ABC ordered the official series named S.H.I.E.L.D. to be written by Joss Whedon and Jed Whedon. And Disney CEO Bob Iger actually greenlit the series after watching the Marvel one-shot Item 47, which was featured on Avengers on Blu-ray and DVD. Months would go by, and in April of 2013, ABC officially announced that the series would be titled Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it was officially picked up for a full season 22 episode order in May of 2013. From then, every May the series would go on to be renewed for a second, third, and fourth season. Now, from day one, it was officially announced that the series would not be about the superheroes, it was going to be about the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and their adventures being just normal people surrounded by the superhuman element. The show was going to be more like a Marvel version of the X-Files or Fringe, where we would see the freak of the week, but it would tie into an overarching story. And one of the big factors that they wanted to make sure was prominent in the TV series was the fact that it could be watched by comic book and non-comic book fans, but that it was rewarding for those that have been watching everything that the MCU has been doing to date. And of course, due to the television side and film side being all under the Disney branch, the TV series could benefit from knowing where the movies were going to go next. And this can be seen reflected throughout the series, such as the use of an enhancement of the Extremis serum, to of course one of the major plot points that was involved in Captain America the Winter Soldier, which actually revealed that Hydra has been infiltrating the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. the entire time. And of course the third and fourth seasons use and the subsequent arrival of the Inhumans. Now, when it came to the casting, one thing was announced on day one, and that was the fact that Agent Coulson, played by Clark Gregg, would be the star of the show and returning to reprise his role from the dead. And of course, how that was handled, they said you would have to watch the TV series to find out how a person that died can come back to the realm of the living. And this is when various theories started to take over onto the internet. Was he in fact going to be Marvel's version of Vision? Was he in fact a life model decoy, which was mentioned in the Avengers, or something else? And of course, additional casting would be done in the subsequent months. Ming-Na Wen was cast as Melinda May. We also had Brett Delton cast as Grant Ward, and Chloe Bennett was chosen among more than 400 actresses auditioning to play the role of Skye. She won that role, and in season 3 she would permanently go on to be known as Daisy. And throughout the seasons, various other actors have joined in. Adrian Palicki, of course, joined as Mockingbird. And most recently in the 4th season, Gabriel Luna joined as Robbie Reyes, aka the Ghost Rider. Now this series is also known for filming in various locations around the world. The majority of the pilot took place in Los Angeles to be able to accommodate Joss Whedon and his working schedule. And ever since the first episode, we've seen various locations from around the world. Paris, France, Sweden, Puerto Rico, and various other countries are all shot on location. Now, given that this is a television series, the special effects does have to be toned down compared to the movie, and the typical season, which consists of close to 18 hours, consists of only 2,000 visual effects, which is of course a far cry from the 2,200 visual effects that a movie like The Avengers has to use in only 2 hours. The soundtrack and the music is composed by Bear McCreary, who is by many known as the John Williams of TV music, and at an average he composes about 30 minutes of music per episode. Now when it comes to the review scores, the average Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode has an aggregate of an 8 out of a 10 or an 82% if you go by Rotten Tomatoes. And the series has largely been accepted as improving every season since its initial release, with many noting that the 2nd season in particular is one of the best on TV among superheroes. Now, as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. does serve as a backbone to the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, obviously throughout the seasons you are going to see major connections that play in line with the movies. Now, while there are a certain amount of people that see this as a disadvantage to the series because it has to adhere to what is happening in the rest of the movie universe, there are those of us who actually see this as a major benefit to being able to expand what is happening with the characters. For example, the first half of the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is relatively slow up until it picks up pace when it ties up with Captain America the Winter Soldier, which is of course the major revelation that Hydra was in fact the one infiltrating the organization. But this would actually later come on to be expanded by in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when it was revealed that Hydra was actually founded way back in the day by an actual Inhuman, which is something that they're doing that the movies have not even touched yet. Now, of course, in Season 1, we would also be able to find out what exactly was happening with Agent Coulson, which would sort of drag on into Season 2, but inevitably we found out that he was brought back due to a serum that was from a Kree, which of course directly tied it into Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, of course, transitioning on into the 2nd season, we would actually see some powered people debut in form of the Inhumans. Now, the Inhumans movie is still slated to come out in about 5 to 6 years, so they definitely have a jump on them in that term. But of course, the 2nd season largely dealing with the Inhumans, we actually got to find out their back history, how they've kind of been around on Earth for a little bit of time, and what exactly is their agenda. And of course, with the major factor of this still being the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. working in the backdrop of the Avengers, we actually get to find out that the reason that the whole Theta Protocol is happening and the reason that Nick Fury shows up with a helicarrier in Avengers Age of Ultron is mainly due to what the agents were doing in the back, kind of playing it low and still trying to hide where they are while they were chasing some of the Hydra goons that were still left over. Then of course in the 3rd season, this was pretty much Inhumans the series. Overall, they went further into the history, of course even going as far as to strand one of the members onto their own planet, which to this day is the highest rated episode of the series and has actually went on and won awards. And this was of course another way that they could tie up some loose ends with such characters as Agent Ward, who actually ended up becoming the Inhuman Hive. And then there is of course the 4th season, which is currently still underway and at the time of this recording has only been 3 episodes in, which of course brought us the debut of the magical side of the MCU, and of course as of right now the Ghost Rider is playing a major part. Now, one of the many parts that has went into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is of course the Inhumans, mainly due to some of the factors I talked about before with Marvel having to sell off certain characters and not owning the mutants anymore. The Inhumans are their way of telling the similar stories but having a slight twist on them, and of course expanding upon what has been said in the movies. where Captain America Civil War can only briefly touch upon the registration and the actual Sokovia Accords, which are dealt with registrations of people with powers, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. the TV series can actually manage to delve deep into that, such as seeing split factions of Inhumans and people that are out to hunt them working either on behalf of the government or being some sort of crime shadow organization. Now, due to the success of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Marvel's continuing partnership with ABC, they were able to pitch this series as one that would begin the huge takeover of Marvel on TV, specifically Netflix. So join me next time as we take a look at two movies that would inevitably end up dividing up the fan base amongst Marvel fanatics. Hey guys, Armin here, just reminding you that this video was made possible thanks to patrons. If you guys are interested in supporting us and making sure we keep the lights on, check out our Patreon where you can join other fans in supporting the CBC delivering content you guys have come to love and expect. And if you can't do that, give us a like and a subscribe, that goes a long way too.